Welcome to the Healer's Café, the number one show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. So, welcome to the Healer's Cafe. Today I have with me Dr. Alan Weisser, and he is a JD jury defense? No,
Juris Doctor. Just call
juris
it
doctor. Okay.
attorney and clinical psychologist.
Okay. Thank you for that. A PhD, and you're a psychologist, an attorney, and a program developer whose career spans more than 5 decades across law, behavioral health, and system level clinical leadership. His work reflects a rare integration of legal, psychological, and organizational expertise with a sustained focus on complex mental health conditions, chronic pain, and the development of effective patient-centered systems of care. All right, I'm not going to go more into your bio will be available for everyone to read all the details, but I wanted to get to our discussion a little bit. Um, well, I first of all welcome, and it's so exciting to meet somebody that has that breadth of knowledge and it's like a high position to look at everything, and make sense of things because we tend to compartmentalize everything and we're not really seeing the bigger picture. So I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, and as I said, thank you as well.
Yeah. So, well, I'm thinking, why don't we start with how how you got to there? Basically, how did you, not just leave one thing behind and move on? Like, how did you organize your life to decide that all of it was going to stay and you're just going to work bigger? How did all that work?
You might find my answer a little bit different than what you'd expect, but I would say it started with comic books.
Okay, go ahead. Please
Yeah.
expand.
Gr- Growing up, I loved science fiction, I loved fantasy, and I was one of those people that read superhero comic books, and I go, I want to be that. Not necessarily somebody with powers, but a person who could help other people, especially people that could not be helped. And
Right.
that was kind of my orientation as a child. And I think that sort of set the foundation for what I did. And so, as you know, there's lots of ways you can help people. And certainly for me personally, I wanted to help people that normally don't get the help.
Mhm.
And I had enough personal experiences with that that also really affirmed that that's what I wanted to do. And that's part of how it started my journey, which went through being a lawyer and then eventually to becoming a clinical psychologist and working with the populations I've worked with. So it started with comic books. That's my origin story.
Okay. And who are this population that you feel are yeah, that are not being looked after that you're able to help?
The human race.
Okay. But more specifically, is there a
I
group
mean,
that,
I mean that with all due respect. I mean, certainly lots of people
okay.
don't necessarily need it, but I think that especially now, too many people do not understand their own power, that they don't understand how to deal with a world that has changed so radically in the last 60 or 70 years, that they don't understand that we don't have to suffer from those changes, but right now we are. And I, through my work and all of it, actually, it all informs you right in the way you summarized it. All the legal skills that I learned, and you know this, made such a difference when I became a psychologist. In a way, it's a perfect combination. One supported the other. Uh, I think people in general have always needed to know their own power. You understand this in your work.
Mhm.
I kept looking, in psychology, as you know, evolves, right? There's been
Right.
many approaches over the years, and current psychology is integrating it always based on the model in physics. So current model is based on quantum mechanics, right? And string
Mhm.
theory. So that's
Mhm.
why they're integrating mindfulness into therapy now. So I was encouraged in my training, and I had a lot of really good training supervision to just think beyond what I knew. And that has led to the development of something that is beyond what I knew. But the legal training, the background about wanting to help people was reinforced. You work with the chronically mentally ill in the state mental hospital, which was what I did in my internship and then stayed for 10 years. It's a very simple choice. You either figure out how you're going to help people whose whole lives are trashed, or you just
Hmm.
don't do it. It's too hard.
Hmm.
Right. I wish that every therapist went through that kind of training because I learned a
Hmm.
lot of things about myself and being there for people. But it was really understanding how do you empower people that are psychotic and institutionalized. And then beyond that work, where I developed a lot of ways to do that beyond what I was taught. And I was encouraged to do that. Then I started working with the chronic pain population almost by accident.
Mm.
There's a reason why I had to stop working with the chronically mentally ill. The system was just too broken.
Right. Okay.
I knew ways well beyond what was being done. You know about institutions and how they get in the way.
Yep.
I get involved with the chronically mentally ill and I go, this is very familiar. These people aren't psychotic, but their whole lives are trashed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get it. The problem is we, by definition, in my opinion, you don't make it through a day without suffering injuries. It's the nature of being human. Being alive is dangerous, right? Whether you stub your toe or somebody slights you or something bad really happens, it's the
Hmm.
natural state of affairs, right? Life comes with side
Hmm.
effects. I go, okay. And I've seen the worst of it. But then I'm going like, okay, well, isn't there some way to counter that? Are we designed to suffer? Which a lot of people believe. I go like, I don't think so.
Hmm.
Digging into all the models of healing and being trained in a lot of them, eventually I find out there's something called the existential immune system that actually is constantly healing as you go through the challenges,
Hmm.
that you're constantly being healed as you're being injured. And if this system is working at an optimal level, you've got a shot. And I've been through this personally as well as professionally. So maybe a bigger answer to the question than what you were asking, but that's
No,
kind
no,
of
no. That's exactly yeah, that's what I'm getting to understand what the scope of it is and how does it make sense and where the limitations are, which are clearly
there's none. There's
yeah,
none. You can be
or
chronically mentally ill, you can be chronically pained, you can have a
right.
problem with your boss. This system started with chronic pain and
Mhm.
chronically mentally. It's a way of dealing with things that is simply understands the nature of your power and how to optimize it. The background in legal training, my martial arts, huge influence on this.
Mhm.
I don't think of what I do so much as therapy anymore. I think of it as you come to the dojo and you learn how to defend your emotional, psychological, and existential life.
Okay, interesting. Well, why don't we, or if you're okay with it, either take yourself as an example or a client without a name, but I'll ask you to speak a little closer to the mic because I'm having some
How
issues.
about, how about this? Is that close enough?
Yeah, that's better.
Yes. Sorry about that. But let me
No,
try a quick experiment. If I disconnect from my external mic,
ah,
use the computer mic, it might clean it up.
sure. Let's
Let
try
me
it.
try unplugging this and see if it works. Now,
Okay. No, no, can't hear you.
yeah, my apologies. Technology is not one of my skills.
Yeah, don't worry. I had
Okay,
my computer not start this morning.
I'll
Okay.
stay on. So I'm sorry, go back to your question.
Yeah, no, so why don't we start with um turning this into a person, whether it's you as an example or anyone that to make the point of sort of what is their journey
Right.
through your methodology, through your eyes. What is it? How does it work?
Great question. I'll give you a quick rundown on the technology and connect it to an actual situation.
Okay.
So, as far as I can tell, all human experience is translated by thoughts and feelings. That's
Mhm.
kind of where the rubber hits the road. We have things happen, we experience it through our thinking and feeling, right? That suggested thought and feeling is very important. And then the question was if you think of them as systems, are they working in the way they were designed? For
Mhm.
example, if you put regular gas in a $2 million car, what's going to happen? It may run, but not well, and
Right.
eventually it's damaged, right? So I won't get into this, the mechanics of the system, but there's a technology for doing this to optimize the thinking process and the feeling process. For example, if you suppress your emotions, you are not working with them. They're tools. All right. You
Mhm.
engage in judgmental thinking, assumptions, generalizations, rationalizations. That is not using thinking in a way that represents the truth.
Mhm.
The goal in this technology is to bring people into using these systems the way they were designed and optimizing them. Give you an example. I'll tell you, there's a lot of ways I could talk about it, but I think the number one tool in helping people heal and stay in healing is to live in inspiration. All
Is
right.
to is to what?
Live in inspiration.
Live in inspiration. Okay. Mhm.
You understand this. You're obviously a really inspired person.
Mhm.
Case in point, I have a patient who suffered some of the worst neck injuries I've ever seen, multiple surgeries. He's involved in the workers' comp system, incredibly depressed, on the verge of killing himself,
Mhm.
but kind of has fighting spirit, which I understand from the martial arts, and I'm trying to help him. So he's in a position where he's not going to return to the work he did before. Physically, can't do it anymore. When I met him, he's over. He's done. He's ready to die. His life has no purpose. It has no meaning. I go, okay, maybe. He had an opportunity to do retraining. All right. You
Mhm.
can go back to school, get it paid for. And I go, so let's talk about your life.
Mhm.
Before you took on responsibilities, did you want to do what you were doing? He says, no. I said,
Mhm.
well, what was the fantasy? What really always appealed to you? It turned out it was robotics. Always fascinated since
Mhm.
he was a little kid, right? So
Mhm.
we tap into what really motivates him, what he loves. And I said, well, you have no choice. You have to change. You can get it paid for. When I tell you that he's one of the worst cases of pain I've ever seen, that how this guy could sit at a computer or go to a classroom, impossible.
Mhm.
He went through the program with an A average because we tapped into what really mattered to him.
Yeah. Mhm.
I have overcome things in my life personally because I love being alive and I do not like a threat to that. And I don't take it lying down. And I hit
Mhm.
the fan with that one when I was 12 and a half, if you may know from my bio. 12 and a
Mhm.
half, I broken my neck. And I was told that I would be a cripple for the rest of my life.
Right.
You know, I've done martial arts over 50 years. Didn't turn out to be a problem. But that was because I go like, maybe that's my story, but I get to choose,
Mhm.
right? And I
Mhm.
made a choice. So the power in being human has to do with the intention you set and the choices you make and what your purpose is. If you know what matters to you, that is incredibly motivating. And then if you develop that around the different skills and tools to use your system,
Mhm.
you put those two together, inspiration and number two, support, emotional connectivity,
Right.
not being alone in it. And then you build the tools around that power and show people you may think you run out of choices. You may think that your life is over. You're a one trick pony. And I go, there's no such thing. You can,
Mhm.
how many lives have you already lived? I've lived, I don't know, 20 lives already. They're
Mhm.
all me, but they're all different.
Right. Mhm.
So I don't know if I'm saying more than you need to hear about, but I took on the challenge of my own disability. I've
Yeah.
taken it with thousands of patients, and I go like, maybe it's not possible to thrive, but you could.
Right.
It's always about possible, and there may be things where you go like, that's it,
Mhm.
maybe. But how
Mhm.
about you? I'm not interested in that.
Right. So, and I don't want to diminish what you're saying. I'm picking on a small part of what you're saying for you to expand on it. When you say, or how I'm taking what you're saying, let's put it this way. It's like there has to be a little gap of possibility, just that openness that you can then get in. Like otherwise, the person's like no, I've done my life, I have no purpose. So is part of it finding through your questioning, you know, like with this fellow you mentioned, you ask them what did they really do what they wanted to do, and then boom, you've got that window, and then it's a question of of bringing that out and turning that into something feasible. Even though he's in chronic pain, he can't sit. Somehow, all of that doesn't matter now that he's connected to his goal or it
No,
actually goes away? Like what's the process that you're seeing?
it doesn't go away. If you look at the book title, it talks about mastering, not managing. All right. In the martial arts, I
Right.
learned how to, I'm very skilled. Does that mean I can never be hurt? Absolutely not. It means I've got a fighting chance.
A fighting chance, yeah.
And you know this. If something really matters to you, it's the person who lifts the car up when their child's injured.
Right.
It's things people do that are exceptional. Stephen Hawking, how do
Yeah.
you do what Stephen Hawking did? I would love
Yeah.
to have met him, like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
don't know that everybody will find their way, but we are not designed to be done. We're
Right.
designed to evolve. And I say, look, maybe you can't find your way into something that would balance. It's about balance. I don't tell
Mhm.
people you're not going to care about your pain anymore or that you're going to be cured. I do tell people that if you can find enough purpose and meaning and connectivity, then it might make it worthwhile to stick around and to find
Mhm.
a way to be in the world. Part of the problem is, you know this, people don't get it. It's dangerous to be alive. People
Right.
don't finding out they're vulnerable. Well, I never had a choice at 12 and a half, like it or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a shock to the system. It's an existential crush. And I go, once you get used to the idea that you can, but you're designed to find a way through this.
Hmm. Hmm.
They don't. I just want to give people a fighting chance.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean suddenly you have no pain or you don't have whatever challenges you have, but you have more power than you think you do.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd be the nemesis of the maid system here in Canada. I'm sure you've heard of it. In Canada, the maid system, medically assisted death.
No,
It's
if a person wants to do that, there's no judgment here. If
no,
that's
it's not about judgment at all. It's the fact that it's the biggest industry we have in Canada, and there's more people killed in that methodology propagated by our government than any other way. So it's the hopelessness they bring to people. Oh, you can't pay your rent. It's really a problem, and sorry, but you do have a way out. You can use this. I mean, I'm mocking it slightly, but not much, And so I was going to say that's why you'd be not very popular in that organization, trying to find
well,
a little bit of hope for people.
listen, there may be situations where it's really not worth it. All
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that that would have to be something so extreme where there's no other logic, right?
Yeah, but it's not how it's implemented. Yeah,
Well, if it's being abused, that's not good.
absolutely. Yeah.
You want that completely. So look, I'm not doing something that's Pollyannish pie in the sky. I've been at this for a long time. And
Yeah.
frankly, I in the beginning I go like, really? I'm gonna do something about this level of suffering. And then, but I'm not the kind of person to go like there's nothing you can do. That's just
Right.
me, right? I'm creative. I got into doing a lot of program development, even in the law. All right. When I was in law school, I had a study group. You know how every person in the study group has a job?
Hmm.
My job was to come up with an innovative way to do the case.
What would your life be like if you were pain free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
Oh yeah, let's use insurance law in a criminal case. All right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just I feel very grateful because when I look at any situation, I usually find some more effective and efficient ways. So I'm just saying, and don't get me wrong, I don't believe in hope, right?
Hmm.
It's magical thinking. What I believe
Right.
is if you know how much power you have as a human, and I mean real power,
Hmm.
maybe in power, you were not designed to be powerless. You can never be powerless as a human. Well, what does that mean? And
Hmm.
how do you connect to that? The work you do actually, I think, is probably based on helping to connect to an aspect of that power, and that's used for the healing process.
Hmm.
I'm just saying, find out what you really got going for you,
Yeah.
or you decide that you have no power and that you're done.
Right. Right. I
And
mean, yeah.
for a lot of people, they go like, "Oh well, if I can learn to live with it, learn to deal with it,
Hmm.
and still have a life,
Yeah.
then if they go like, I've lost it all, there's no point, never getting back." Okay,
So how was it for you, like as a 12-year-old with, such a serious injury, and how did you how did you get to the next step? Like what was the process for you to
it nearly destroyed
Right.
my life.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because I just shut down.
Mm.
Nobody, if you talked to me during that whole healing period, I mean, I was on my back in the bed for a year in a brace, not allowed to move. I had to learn how to walk again, even though I wasn't paralyzed. But nobody knew. I'd crack jokes. Nobody knew. I didn't let myself know how I was feeling. But here's the interesting part. I've got advanced degrees, right? And picture that I'm flunking out of high school.
Hmm.
Remember,
Hmm.
this happened through junior high.
Right.
And if you asked me at the time why I'm not doing well, I would have said, I'm not very smart.
Hmm.
And then I ran into a chemistry teacher in junior year.
Uh-huh.
Was a young, very enthusiastic, funny guy. He liked to blow things up. So I liked him.
Yeah.
Halfway through the quarter, he's going, "You're failing my course. Why are you failing?" I go, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You're smart." I'm like, no, I'm not. I literally debated with him.
Wow.
And he said, "You know what? I don't care." He made me come after school. I got through the course with a C. It didn't convince me that I was smart, but it made me wonder that maybe if I worked hard enough, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
There were people along the way, and that continued. I got through high school, then I got into
Right.
college the hard way. There were people that come along and go like, "You don't really know who you really are." But here's the part that is really important. I didn't know until 30 years later why I always thought I was stupid in high school. I never asked myself, why did you think you weren't smart?
Mhm.
Right? I was busy proving that I was smart most of my
Right.
early life. Law school, that was a test.
Hmm. Hmm.
Graduate school, that was a bigger test. That
Right.
was a lot harder than law school. Until 30 years ago, 30 years later, in a session with a patient, I'm reflecting back on that moment and something surfaced that I completely buried. It was what I thought when the doctor came in the room and said what he did. I thought, stupid, stupid, stupid. Look what you did to yourself.
Mm. Wow.
30 years later, my
Yeah.
whole early life was plagued by this. I'm smart. I was able to be accomplished on the surface. I look fine. I was not. There was nothing about my life that wasn't questioned. There was no real confidence behind the bravado.
Right.
I soldiered my way through it, but I kept meeting people who reflected, who said, you need to know who you really are. I won't
Hmm.
make it through this life safely unless we have people to help us.
Hmm.
Whether it was in law school or friendships or when I traveled out in the world and ended up living with Bedouin for a while, there was people who go like, you don't seem to know who you really are.
Hmm. Hmm.
When I work with people, I'm trying to pass that along and go like, you may think you know who you are, what you are. Actually, you don't.
Hmm.
So I'm very grateful for that. And I also
Yeah.
understand why if you don't look at the whole life of a person, everything that's been affected, nobody was asking me.
Hmm.
And I actually checked in with family after this and I said, like, how did I seem during that time? Which I'd never asked, by the way.
Hmm.
My two brothers had family. They go, you seem to be fine.
Hmm.
You think the
Hmm.
doctors asked me how I was feeling about what happened to me? You think the doctors even bothered to check up on me to see if maybe
Yeah.
I could recover more? Never happened.
Yeah.
So this is personal for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the most critical part of any care, right? Like any connection. It's the connection that allows the healing in that sense to take place. And it's so beautiful the way like in your life it happens along the path. And I think that's what it is, you know, in everybody's life in a sense, and but to take the moment to notice it is also important, right? Because I think sometimes these statements are, at least if I reflect in my life, I've heard such thing like, "Oh, you haven't figured out who you are yet." Yeah, sure, you got 3 degrees and blah blah blah, you know, and and it's like, yeah, I know who I am, as ego goes forward, but it wasn't fully all ego. I really wanted to help people. That was the driver. So I was doing what I loved. But it's really the power of understanding the inner power that everyone has. Like when I tell my patients, your body can heal. It's made to heal. It's almost like we have to appreciate that it can. It's built this way. Let's not fight it. How can we contribute to this? How can we notice it? How can we, work with it, right? And I think and I'm only at the beginning of this journey, but and maybe when you say the real power that we have, it goes beyond also the physical. You could call it spiritual. That's one way, but I'm not trying to put any religion in there either.
I
It's
think you can say that it's string theory for the human being. Because what is the equivalent of string theory for humans?
string theory, okay? Huh?
String theory is about everything's made up of energy, right?
Right. Yeah,
So we are energy.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And what you do and what I do says you are an energetic being.
Yeah,
You
exactly. Yeah.
channel that energy through your intention, through your choices, through
Yeah.
your purpose. You do that. I don't know about you, but I believe that humans don't need machines and they don't need doctors. But we
Hmm.
are not raised to understand the power that we have innately to heal. And then people like yourself come along and
Hmm.
go, no, actually, you can. And here's
Hmm.
how you do it. All right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like I said, humans are wonderful creatures. They just don't know it and they could destroy themselves, not even understanding, right?
Right. Yeah. Huh. Very interesting. What a profound morning conversation. Oh wow, that's quite something. Yeah, and also just like how, just because nobody asked you how you were and you didn't think about asking how you were because at that age you didn't have that, like you have no context to understand how you could understand, right? It's like you're just and there you are, you know.
Well,
And,
just so you know, even physically, I found out years later why I was okay. Actually got to see a chiropractor who took x-rays and he goes, I've never seen this before. He said, you seem to have experienced a natural fusion, which
uh,
might have been the result of the treatment. But if I could have experienced that, the doctors never said that could happen or what I
right.
need to do. I suspect that part of it was just physical, but I think some of it was my intention. Remember, I
Mhm,
was not
mhm,
going to
mhm.
be held back by this.
Right.
And you see this with people you work with. If your person's intention is set on healing, they're more likely to heal. You know,
Absolutely.
the placebo effect. I mean, these are not magic. This is
Mhm.
people tapping into that power. The problem is a lot of
Exactly.
people are educated to not even understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They dependent on a system that's more about profit than it is about cure.
Yep. And hopefully we're changing that system as we speak.
Well,
And
Canada's probably got a better shot at it compared to what's going on here right now.
I don't know, like honestly, we're so bureaucratically, technocratically stuffed up that we don't know who's like there's a lot of soul missing in what's happening here. So I'm not so sure about that,
I'll put it this way: I'd trade bureaucracy for what's going on here right
You see the bureaucracy here. Yeah,
None of what's going on in this country right now.
yeah,
I know about bureaucracy and the problems with it. And by the way, just go back to what you started with about being a lawyer.
right.
Being a lawyer means advocating.
Yes.
And I think that part of the journey that I went through was having to advocate for other people. You can't do that if you're not willing to know you can do that.
Correct.
It was part of the healing journey for me to actually help other people. I started at Legal Aid Society. I was working
Okay.
with people that had no resources, all right, and
Yeah,
going up
yeah,
against systems. And
yeah.
what's going on right now in the world, we both know is something that was inevitable.
Mhm,
Human race is due for a reset.
mhm.
But the good news is there are people like yourself, me, other people I know, probably you know, there may be a soft landing down the road a piece, but there was things needed to reshuffle.
Absolutely.
Just as
Mhm,
you do in treatment, I'm doing and what I do,
mhm,
just better mousetraps. I
mhm.
know a lot of people, I bet you do, that go give us the opportunity. FDR from in the 30s, the New Deal,
Yeah.
that's what he did. He took the smartest minds in the country. They came up with a brand new, totally innovative program and saved the country,
Mhm,
right? Well, where's the kitchen cabinet now? Right.
mhm, mhm.
So I think that that's why I am not pessimistic about what happens next. I
No,
think there's going
me
to be a
neither.
lot of pain. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of pain to go through. But on the
Yeah.
other side, I think the human race may be ready to hear a message, which is very simple. You come together and wonderful things happen. You pull apart and terrible things happen. You get to choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
How bad does it have to get before you go like enough, right? Violence has never, ever helped the human race,
Mhm.
right?
No. No,
Gandhi,
no, sure.
take your pick, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good speech, but that's how I see the current state of things. If Canada is caught in that situation, but Canada is being confronted now with having to change whether it wants to or not.
Oh, absolutely. But I feel like it's almost, the New World Order uh, protocol, and it managed to exist visibly and tangibly here, whereas in some countries, not that aspects of it haven't, but people have kind of, well, or they're more concentrated, like in Europe, or they fought against it, or they're more separated and therefore more politics comes into play. There's all kinds of reasons, but I feel like, yeah, it's inevitable in Canada, but it's going to be a shocker, this waking, because I mean, that's where, advocacy, I ended up not being able to keep my license because of you had to choose between freedom of speech or or protocols that were believed, wrongly believed, but I think it's even more dirty than that. Necessary for human safety and health, which freedom to choose and ethics, you can't come from law without going, no, 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 no way. I need to know what's in here before I get informed consent. Informed consent means informed, and so, I mean, I couldn't do this. So the advocacy part, came out loudest actually in the health department, but it comes back to, wait a minute here, everyone has got to wake up. you know Individually, everyone's got to not believe that these systems that are supposed to serve us, they're not supposed to control us. We're paying for management of sorts, but we're not, like, I think there was a 400% increase in people working for the government during Trudeau's time, and now we're just like, it's those who have a job are on one side, and those who are self-employed or losing their jobs are on the other side. Like, it's a fine, fine line. Everything's a little grain of salt because once you make a generalization, there's always untruths, but generally that's kind of where the advocacy is necessary here. But I do think that sometimes you have to show how extreme it could be for people to go, wait a minute here, this is not okay, you know. So I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, well, too many people have been asleep at the wheel, but
Yeah,
I think that's the result of too much change too fast. The world has not adjusted to automation,
right.
globalism,
Yeah,
technology. AI is now jumping into the middle of all of that,
yeah,
which is profound. But
yeah.
I trust in the human race. I trust in
Mhm.
evolution.
Yeah.
Maybe we survived it, maybe we don't, but I think we could. And I think that there are a lot of people who know that. And like I said, I think that people in general, at least in this country, are getting tired of being divided.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they're beginning to understand, where's that really taking you? This is the Pied Piper, right? Sounds good, but you're going off a cliff.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but I've lived through the 60s and 70s. I know a little bit about risking your license. I
Mhm.
came really close more than once
Mhm.
because, as you said, you either stand up or you don't.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like to resist doing that, every system I've ever been involved in, which is why I ended up doing what I do now,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is I will now be able to be setting a different tone in all systems. I'm not here to
Right.
change systems, but I am here to help people who, in the moment, when they're dealing with a problem, they are empowered to deal with it.
Right.
The more people who realize you've got a responsibility. You know that in this country, with a presidential election, less than half the population votes.
Yeah.
And
Here
why
it's not
people
even
not
important.
understand, and people say, why should I vote? It's only one vote. I get, how did that ever happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
You think about that, right? And I think people are going out because what's going to happen, and you and I know this in this next election, people are going to have to really ask themselves how important it is that they have a right to vote.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't like the fact that there has to be pain before gain, but I'm not sure it could have happened any other way.
Mhm.
Trump's it's not the problem; he's a symptom.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, Canada is its own life. I don't know Canada well enough, although my best friend in life is from Canada.
Mhm.
I traveled with him for a long time. I actually had a bag that had a Canadian flag. I preferred to be Canadian at that point. Uh, I spent a lot of time in British Columbia and Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
it's changing, but this
Yeah.
conversation, people knowing that there's other options, that there's ways through
Mm.
this, that's what people need to know.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, our time is up, Alan. And anyway, this is sort of the way I see the contribution is putting discussions like this, things that matter really to people who are in healthcare. And so I'm really thrilled that we were able to, yeah, to have this conversation. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking
me
the
too,
taking the.
because we're going to be launching an educational program, so you don't just have to see me as a therapist. There'll be a lot of things available that you'll hear more about, and most
Great.
likely I'll be doing my own podcast. I want to just extend an invite in advance.
Oh, fantastic. I'd love to be part of that.
Yeah,
Great.
I'll keep you posted, but probably by the end of the summer.
Okay, that'll be perfect timing.
I really, truly appreciate the conversation. Like I said, people need to know there's possibilities.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us at the Healers Cafe. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.